before we start, some of these people may not know who you are. So would you each take a minute and just share your name and company and role and what you're focused on?
Well, I won't need a minute. Yep, Ilyas Khan.
Ready, go.
My name is Ilyas Khan. I'm the founder and also the Chief Product Officer of Continuum, which was the merger between Cambridge Quantum and Honeywell Quantum Solutions.
Yes.
And my day job is the Chief Product Officer. All of the technology teams, from the hardware to the middleware to the software, reporting to me.
Thank you. Maud?
I am Maud Villiers. Bonjour. And as you can guess, I'm French. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cobly. Cobly is a hardware quantum computing company. We make large-scale quantum computers based on silicon technologies. And actually, we leverage 20 years of academic research that took place in Grenoble.
Okay, thank you. Kenny, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenny Lee. I'm a research scientist at Google. I lead a team of scientists that's devoted to improving the hardware, in particular, trying to get the error rates down to something so that we can scale to a very large system.
Great, thank you. And Yuval?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yuval Bulguer. I'm Chief Commercial Officer of Quera. What that means is that I help customers make progress in their quantum journey, whether they need to use quantum computers online or purchase them for on-site deployment. We believe that neutral atoms is a very good way to make large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computers, and we have evidence to prove that we are the most advanced neutral atom company.
Great, thank you. So let's begin at the beginning, right? So key differences between logical qubits and physical qubits, right? This is an ongoing conversation. I would say there are different perspectives on what all this means. So let's start by describing, what is the difference and why is it important when we're talking about quantum computing. Kenny, you want to go first?
Great, thank you. So physical qubits are the building blocks of a quantum computer. And as you've seen in plenty of talks today, in order to do something that's commercially viable, you need to be able to do about 1 trillion operations without having an error. Now, the problem with most physical qubits is that they have an error about once every 1,000 operations. And so the question is, how do you bridge that enormous gap, right? That's a factor of 1 million, or billion, I should say. So how do we get there? And the answer is what's called logical qubits. And logical qubits are an encoding of the information in an array of physical qubits. So you have a lot of physical qubits to store 1 bit of quantum information. And the idea there is as you add more and more physical qubits to your encoding, you can suppress the error rate of your logical qubit to the point where hopefully you can get to 10 to the minus 12. And we believe that error correction is the path to achieving that. So logical qubits are the eventual building block of a fault-tolerant quantum computer. And they're based on physical qubits.
Maud, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
No, you understood what Kenny was telling you. Logical qubits are kind of the archetype of the qubit that is used in the algorithms. And what it takes to build logical qubits, you understood from Kenny, it takes 3 things. It takes a technology to build excellent and a lot of physical qubits. It takes what you didn't say is that it takes a control system to probe all those qubits individually, and it takes algorithm to have the correct quantum error correction scheme. And with these 3 elements, there is one question. There is one secret sauce that glue them together. It's the time it takes to correct them. Let's make an experiment. I'm raising my right arm. You say that's not true, and and you can tell me right away. But let's say that I was in Gatwick, for instance, what I did this morning. If I do that, you can't tell me, hey, Maud, that's the wrong arm. And in the meantime, I can keep going on, and nobody's telling me, oh, that's the wrong arm. There is something that we need to take into account is the proximity of the control system and the qubits. We need to have them close together, whether it's within a distance or whether it's in time. This is where I want to introduce the underdog technology. This is the semiconducting spin qubits, the very same one that are in our chips, because you can actually design good qubits with silicon, and at the same time you leverage all the potential, the know-how of the semiconductor industry to design the integrated circuit that performs the control system. So that's another way to go to logical qubits, where you actually leverage the potential of the classical semiconductor industry to design those wave 2 logical qubits.
Yeah, well, sort of continuing on that theme. So thank you for sharing that. Obviously, quantum computing it's not going to replace or supplant. It's going to augment. Right? We're seeing the ongoing theme around. IBM's talking about quantum-enabled superconducting environments or whatever. But want to get your take on, how can we leverage classical computing, in this case, say CPUs and GPUs, in the path to error correction and ultimately the path to logical qubits. Yuval, what's your take on that?
I first wanted to answer the question in your panel talk: who will win the race to logical qubits?
Okay.
And I think the answer
That's
is
the
that
last question. Right?
I think the answer is
End
that the
with that.
customer will win the race, because logical
Right.
qubits are the key to making long calculations that deliver value to customers. And so
enough.
what you do classically today, because the qubits today are fragile, they're not good enough to make these super long calculations, then classical comes in two places. One is people break up algorithms into bits into quantum and classical components, and they run these hybrid algorithms. So that's one way classical and quantum combine. And the other thing, when you do measurement, when you measure physical qubits, when you measure logical qubits to detect and correct errors, often you have GPUs or either other high-speed classical compute do the control mechanisms for those. So that's how classical and quantum combine for logical qubits and qubits in general.
Yeah. Ilias, what about your take?
Well, first of all, agree with everything that's been said, and there's an increasing focus on the whole issue of error correction, because for the first time, people that are interested in solving problems have access to a multiplicity of different machines. And of course, they start to ask awkward questions, and those awkward questions are all about what's it going to take for me to be able to solve a problem. So I think Yuval was spot on. Yeah, look, I think my take on this is, just to supplement what's been said here, is that we have been confronted over the last 2 years with this incredible tsunami, or whatever you want to call it, revolution of AI and generative systems. And I think that one of the areas that we're very interested in at Quantinuum, with our partners, particularly work we're doing with Microsoft, is how do we look at improving the human artisanal approach to quantum error correction, which has a long and noble history, but as we have found, machines might be better than we are and don't have a long and noble history. So we are exploring ways in which these large systems can help us get better at this. And so we have 4 approaches. We have an approach which is looking at exploiting the carbon code with Microsoft, and we had some results on that. We exploit the fact that we have these very high physical fidelities, so we have a threshold. The second approach is we are looking very carefully at our own developments, and we're particularly interested at something called the GNON, which is this toric code, which is naturally fault tolerant, and we'll be producing some results on that. In each of those cases, our overheads are extremely low, so single-digit overheads. And then the third area we're looking at, of course, that we've published on is a fault-tolerant qubit, which is this non-abelian anion. And then we've recently published something called an iceberg code, which is a combination of both detection and error correction. So that's sort of the first 90% of the answer. And the last 10% of the answer is that I'm overwhelmed by the number of people, talented people, who are working on this. And I think for many of us, it's time to start looking at external influences in our work. We will not solve this problem just by being a closed shop. We will need help from other organizations. And I think at Quantinuum, with the high gate fidelities, obviously our announcement yesterday, allows us now to welcome those people in and give them access to these machines. And we will learn something that we could otherwise not have learned.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, want to ask about where we are in the transition. So, you mentioned some great work that you're doing, some projects that are underway, partnerships. But where are we in the transition from physical to logical qubits? Have there been major breakthroughs or milestones? Kenny, I want to pose that question to start with you.
Yeah, so there have been really, really nice demonstrations in a variety of platforms, including ChatDians at Continuum, Neutral Atoms at QERA, and of course superconducting qubits at Google, which is our platform of choice. In particular, there was a really great result that we published last year where we demonstrated that quantum error correction works as you scale the system size. So if you remember my first answer, as we add more and more physical qubits to our encoding, our error rate should get better and better. And we proved that for the first time in an experiment. So this is finally out of the realm of theory. It is truly a reality. And so by doing this, we now have faith that as we scale our system, then we can continue to improve our error rates to the point that we can achieve 10 to the minus 12 error rate or something like that. And Google is continuing to work towards this long-lived logical qubit. That's the next path on our milestone. We're working on not only having a very long-lived logical qubit, but also multi-qubit gates between logical qubits, real-time error correction, things like that. And this is something that superconducting qubits are uniquely positioned to do because of how fast they are. So something that differentiates superconducting qubits from many other platforms is just how quickly we can do operations. So the clock cycle of the Google machine is around 1 microsecond. That is very, very fast. What that allows us to do is many, many calculations in the time it takes many other platforms to do the same thing. And so we hope that in our next milestones that we'll be able to show that we can perform millions of rounds of error correction, which is absolutely necessary to do anything useful in a commercial setting.
Yeah. Yuval, your perspective on where we are in the transition.
We're in an interesting point where we're sort of taking 1 foot off the rung of a ladder. And so we're 1 foot on physical and 1 foot on logical. We published our quantum computing roadmap earlier this year. And the first machine that we have for customers to use in 2024 has at least 256 physical qubits and at least 10 logical qubits. And so when I ask customers, well, what would you want? Do you want more qubits or do you want better qubits? And they're not sure yet. So there's some experimentation to do. But it does highlight one of the reasons, or several of the reasons, that we're excited about Neutral Atom as the platform of choice for logical qubits. First, a logical qubit is made of multiple physical qubits. So you have to start with many physical qubits. Otherwise, you're not going to have many logical qubits. Indeed, the demonstration that was referenced earlier was done in December last year by Harvard and QERA, and we demonstrated 48 logical qubits. That's more than many vendors have physical qubits. So we had a machine with hundreds of physical qubits, and there are at least 48 logical qubits. The other reason neutral atoms are attractive is the qubits can move. They can rearrange themselves, or we can rearrange them. And that flexibility of any qubit to interact with any other qubit allows the implementation of error correction schemes that are not possible when you have static qubits. And so one of the things we're excited about this year is we're opening up the platform to researchers to look at different error correction codes, some of which could be implemented in other platforms, and some of which could only be implemented in neutral atom or dynamic platforms, to find what is the best one. So, and the last sort of part of the answer, if we look at our roadmap and we're predicting at least 30 logical qubits in 25 and at least 100 logical qubits in 26, the simulation limit for classical supercomputers is about 50 qubits. So somewhere between 25 and 26, we're going beyond sort of the edge of the earth. We're going into this zone where you say, I can actually do stuff that I cannot do classically. And we're super excited about that. And we're not going to fall off the edge of the earth.
Glad to hear that news. So we're talking about, obviously the qubit modality, the landscape is wide and expanding. Anyons are now being introduced. We've heard, Kenny's take on superconducting, your take on neutral atoms. Mode, what's your take on the silicon spin approach, and will that drive or accelerate logical qubit creation, or to what degree is that a factor?
That's the idea. That's the raison d'être of silicon spin qubits. It's to fill the gap. What we're talking about, to have a disruptive, we're talking about disrupting the computation, and disrupting the computation means a lot of logical qubits, and a lot of logical qubits demands a lot of physical qubits. So we're talking about the question, what we're tackling in this panel is really the scaling of the systems that we have currently into large-scale quantum computers. And that's where silicon spin qubits have definitely a disruptive, a unique asset, because they're leveraging the semiconductor industry, which not only knows how to do a lot of similar objects. We all have 25 billion of transistors in our pockets, but they really look alike. They really look alike. And as I was telling you, they've got the integrated circuit that allows for the fast feedback. We're just hearing about the time it takes to feed, the time it takes to perform the operations. And silicon spin qubits are fast, and the feedback loop is set really next to it. So this is what silicon spin qubit promises.
And will accelerate logical qubit creation because of that, or?
And definitely it accelerates logical qubit because of that, because we've got access to a large amount of physical qubits. And what is great, what we need to do that, we need an ecosystem. And we've heard a lot about the ecosystem, that we can't do it by ourselves. And I just want to focus on 3 components of this ecosystem. We need an industry. The bet is that to go to large scale, it's nice to tackle scientific and technological problems, but we need to embed at the same time the industrialization, and reusing the legacy of the semiconductor ecosystem, which is at the moment, we've heard it this morning, overwhelmed by AI. But now, if the next wave is quantum computing, so we can actually leverage the know-how and the legacy of this semiconductor industry on one hand. This is one component. Second component that we need to speed up the advent of logical qubit is that we still need to empower the academics. We need better quantum error correction algorithms, which demand for less overhead, which are faster, and we need to share as an industry. We want to share our the problem we're facing with the scientists, so that they bring in solutions. And Yuval mentioned it, last but not least, to speed up the race for a logical qubit, we need to work with the industry on use cases that uses logical qubit, that make the assumption that they will arrive, so that we sharpen the trade-off between quality and quantity of the qubits. And there are a lot of trade-offs that we need to think of in terms of engineering at the system level. And those trade-offs are going to be shaped by the use cases that are relying on logical qubits. And this is the time to engage and just forecast what we will need.
Yeah. So you're talking about sort of leveraging learnings and process from the silicon industry, right? Want to ask more broadly about the value of sort of partnerships or collaborations, and how that's going to drive, from a business perspective, right, the creation of logical qubits and what the end result will be. Ilias, what kinds of collaboration do you think will accelerate this process?
Yeah, well, most people in the room can see that I haven't fallen off the edge of the planet, because most people in the room may not yet have seen that we actually did prove yesterday that we have reached the point at which our quantum processor cannot be simulated by any number or concatenation of classical computers. And that was done in collaboration with Argonne National Labs and Caltech and JP Morgan, and some people call that quantum supremacy. We don't. We call it something else, which is just general non-simulatable quantum computers.
Great.
But the point I wanted to make really was slightly in response to my colleagues. I think we do see the world, I think, slightly differently, which is good. You know, everybody here wants to solve the same problems. I think this idea that you need lots and lots and lots of physical qubits needs defining.
Okay.
And the second thing that needs defining is at what point is a logical qubit a value? So we're very focused on giving numbers and specificity and metrics and publishing on these points. So just for everybody in the room who's interested in this, the idea of having 100 logical qubits for us is interesting, but if you have 100 logical qubits that are at 3, 4, 5, or 6 nines, is very different from having them at 6, 7, 8, 9 nines. These are orders of magnitude different.
Right.
And the overhead that we see, well, we can say lots, but a system that will be in production for us with customers will have a very small number of qubits, and they will have a much larger number of logical qubits because of things like the fidelity, the mid-circuit measurement, the all-to-all connectivity. And I think the reason I would say that is that I think there'll be many winners. I think hopefully every one of us on this platform will have machines that have an impact on the world in which we live. But the way in which we get to them shouldn't be religious. So I just want to counter this idea that you need 100 or 200 or 1,000 logical qubits. You don't. And we have proven that. And we will have 100 logical qubits at 8 nines in less than 2 years. And that's really important. And the overhead will be less than 10. So our roadmap and our integrated roadmap is something that we've had now for many, many years. And when we say something, we do it. And so that's really important for us to get that counter conversation going. We may be wrong. All of us might be wrong. But the point is, we need numbers. We need specificity. We need to be held accountable. We can't just say lots of qubits or loads of... those days are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what Peter Knight said. I don't know if Peter's in the room today. Well, Peter Knight, I mean, he's a godfather of the industry here. So Peter said a wonderful, wonderful presentation this morning, which I might be online. I won't repeat it.
No, it was a great presentation. Yeah, fantastic. How they're spending 2.5 billion pounds or whatever. Yeah, amazing. So we're coming close to the end. I want a little time for questions, but I want to raise the conversation just again to a business level. So logical qubits, physical qubits. Interesting, but is there a pony in here is what I always like to say, right? So can each of you share examples of real world solutions being delivered today in what we might call the pre-logical qubit era? Again, as examples for people interested in investing or engaging with partners or developing solutions. Point in time where we are. Yuval, you want to go first?
One of the things that
examples.
happened when we published together with Harvard the report of the 48 logical qubits is that a lot of leaders in the enterprise space came to us and said, before we read this article, before we read this paper, we thought that quantum was 5 years away and that results like you had demonstrated will be 2 or 3 years into the future. And now that you've demonstrated these results, that timeline has shrunk for us. And so we can envision how this is becoming useful for us in 2 years and maybe 3 years. And as a result, we want to work with you immediately to start creating algorithms that are optimized to your platform that can deliver true business value in 2 years. So we are working with a select number of customers to do exactly that, leveraging both large number of qubits as well as very flexible logical qubits to create that enterprise value, we believe, in the next 2 years or so.
Yeah. Kenny, what about pre-logical qubit examples?
So I might be a little bit different than the rest of the panelists, but my answer would be there's not really anything of commercial value right now.
Okay, duly noted.
There is a lot of really, no, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really interesting, awesome examples of work being done on quantum computers
Be candid,
right now.
for sure.
However, commercial value won't come until we've demonstrated really high quality logical qubits, and I will stand by that statement.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Mode, what's your take?
I do
What's the
agree.
view from Grenoble?
No, I do agree. I do agree with Kenny. And there are early prototypes currently and that's what I was telling you. We need more logical qubits if we want to leverage the whole value of quantum computing, and the race is not finished yet. There's one point that we didn't talk about is the speed of our quantum computers. And Kenny started pointing out, he's talking in terms of microsecond. And this is the fastest time scale that quantum computers can perform. And there are some platforms that are way slower than the microsecond and the megahertz. And you know the speed of our classical computers today. We're talking about gigahertz, and you name it. We need billions of operations. So I let you make the calculation, what the time it will take if we want to take numbers, if we've got a Hertz quantum computers. So some platforms are running at the Hertz, the typical time scale. So to have real life applications, not only do we need logical qubits, and there are some today, but we need fast logical qubits that can run lots of operations and billions of operations. And this is something that we've got to thought through in terms of having quantum computers that deliver at speed.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. Without integrated photonics in our platform, we're currently at microseconds as well. So that's our current limit, and we're a few years away from being beyond that. I think it's a really good point. Yeah, no, there are no. Listen, if there was a problem being solved today, we wouldn't be sitting here. The whole world would know about it. So there are none. I'm in Kenny's camp, but perhaps I would say that there is a very good chance that later on this year or early next year, there'll be something commercial that does leverage these platforms. And I think that we're, again, taking up Yuval's point, we're waking up the users. They're beginning to look at these things more seriously. But right now, today, there's nothing.
Okay. So there's some questions. We have like 2 minutes. See if we can pull up a question or two from the Slido. Here's what it says. What do you expect will be the ratio between physical and logical qubits, and will it change across different modalities? Kenny, what do you think? You're
Sure, I'm happy to answer this
you're
one.
a bracket, right? So is that does that color your perspective?
What's that?
Bracket, right? I mean, we're offering
Oh,
Amazon
sure.
instance of qubit modalities.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the answer to this question really depends on which error correcting code you use. In principle, it doesn't really matter what the modality is. I mean, at the moment, as you've all said, they have a neutral atom computer with auto connectivity, so they can do certain types of codes that maybe are harder to do on different platforms. The answer is it really depends, and the number could be 1 million depending on what your errors are. It could be several tens. But time will tell. There's a lot of really interesting research on quantum error correcting codes that may significantly reduce the overhead. So we'll find out.
Cool. Well, we've come to the end of the time. Yuval, Kenny, Maud, Elias, thanks so much for sharing your perspective. How about a hand for the panel? Thank you. That's right.